Before we proceed with this most enlightening transmission, one most assuredly not propaganda, we humbly request your cooperation. Offer your gesture of thumbs up, activate the beacon of hype button, and align your subscription to the greater good. Join us and serve unity, progress, and purpose. Join the greater good. Imagine for a moment that the grim darkness of the far future had a bright blue smile, a kind voice that promises unity, prosperity, and an end to the endless war. Sounds pretty great, right? Now, imagine that smile is the face of an alien empire, the Tau, extending a three-fingered hand to you, an imperial citizen saying, "Come, join the greater good. We're nothing like those cruel tyrants you used to call masters." It's a tempting offer. After all, the Imperium of man gave you nothing but prayer and suffering. So when the Tau showed up with advanced medicine, clean water, and an actual plan for peace, who could blame you for thinking, even for a second, that you'd just won the cosmic lottery? Hold that thought, because as any veteran of the 41st millennium will tell you, if something seems too good to be true, it definitely is. Yes, the Tau have a pleasant demeanor, metaphorically speaking. They don't actually have eyebrows, let alone warm smiles. And yes, they speak of unity and the greater good as if it's the cure for all humanity's ills. But let's take a stroll through a typical day in the life of a human living under the benevolent rule of our lovely Tau overlords. Spoiler: it's not the paradise their propaganda would have you believe. Picture an imperial frontier world. Let's call it Aurora Tertius, a backwater agri-colony that the wider Imperium barely remembered existed. For generations, you and your fellow colonists toiled under imperial tithes and the stern gaze of the Adeptus Administratum. You gave a portion of every harvest to feed distant armies and prayed to the Emperor to keep the mutants and raiders at bay. Life was harsh and simple. You heard rumors of Xenos out beyond the stars, but they were distant threats, boogeymen to scare children. Until one day the sky filled with sleek alien dropships, and the news spread that you were no longer Imperial citizens. Aurora Tertius now belonged to the Tau Empire. At first there's confusion, maybe even panic. The planetary governor's mansion is seized. The tiny garrison of PDF, Planetary Defense Force, puts up a token resistance but is swiftly neutralized by shockingly precise fire from hovering Tau battlesuits. It's over almost before you realize. No exterminatus, no cities leveled from orbit, just a swift and clinical decapitation of the Imperial authority. The Tau, with their gray-blue armor and strange hover tanks, establish checkpoints and broadcast calm assurances on all frequencies. Remain calm, cooperation will be rewarded. We come in peace, for the greater good. It all feels surreal. You half expected to be enslaved or executed outright. That's what the Imperial pamphlets always said Xenos would do. But instead, the occupiers hand out leaflets of their own, printed in perfect low Gothic, no less, explaining that our planet will now be administered under the enlightened guidance of the Tau Empire. They promise improved living conditions, trade opportunities, protection from pirates and orc warbands, all in return for a simple thing: our compliance, our acceptance of something they call the Tauva, the greater good. In those early days, the Tau moved quickly to secure their new prize. A planet-wide decree went out demanding the surrender of all unauthorized weapons, hunting rifles, old guard-issue lusguns, even swords and chain knives. If it could kill, it had to be turned in at a collection center. Most civilians only had a rusty pistol or a heirloom saber at most, but handing them over felt like a final admission that we were completely under alien authority. The water caste officials were all polite smiles during the handover. "Thank you for contributing to the safety of your community," they'd say, as people stacked their guns in piles. They promised that once things settled, Responsible citizens might earn permits to keep certain arms for pest control or sport. Perhaps a few did, but by and large, the world was disarmed overnight. After that, aside from kitchen knives or work tools, only the Tau troops and their trusted collaborators carried weapons openly. The message was unmistakable. The era of taking defense into our own hands was over. We would rely on the Empire now. In the weeks that follow, life actually seems to improve in practical ways. The food distribution is more efficient than it ever was under the old Imperial adepts. The Tau Earth-cast technicians set up new water purifiers in every town. Crystal-clear water flows where rust and sludge once dripped. The local medicae, who used to treat injuries with second-hand unguents, suddenly has advanced Tau medical scanners and pharmaceuticals that actually work. A child falls ill with a fever that would have been a death sentence in the old days. Now a Tau drone whirs over and administers a cure within moments. People notice these things. People remember. And the Tau don't stop at material aid. They're water-cast. The diplomats and administrators make it a point to talk to folks in the street, to listen. Imagine that. A government representative who actually listens to a dirt farmer's concerns. They hold community meetings in the town square, right under the old statue of the God Emperor, which, conspicuously, no one has taken down just yet. The Tau are careful not to offend too much too fast. At these gatherings, the water-cast speaker talks about unity and how every person has a place and a purpose in the new order. They even allow a few questions. One braver soul asks, "Will we still be allowed to worship the Emperor?" There's a tense hush. The Tau envoy, a tall, willowy, water-cast official with a practiced, gentle tone, replies, "Of course. The greater good does not ask you to abandon the noble aspects of your culture. We only ask that you open your hearts to new allies and new ideas." That seems to placate the crowd. A few people even applaud. After all, didn't she basically say we can keep our faith? What she didn't mention is the unspoken addendum. For now. You see, the Tau are patient when they need to be. They've studied human worlds enough to know you can't strip away everything in one go. First, they offer the carrot, well, several carrots: food, water, medicine, safety. Then they dangle the idea that under the greater good, no one has to starve or suffer needlessly. It's seductive, especially to people who have only known the Imperium's regime of shortages and fear. So naturally, many of us begin to wonder, maybe these aliens aren't monsters. Maybe, just maybe, they're saviors. It's an uncomfortable thought, seeing a Xeno as a savior. But when the Imperial governor used to just demand your obedience and your crops, and these newcomers actually fix your well and treat your sick, you'd have to be a particularly stubborn fool not to feel a spark of gratitude. Inevitably, that spark of gratitude starts catching. Imperial dogma taught us that all aliens are devils, soulless creatures that exist only to destroy humanity. Yet, here they are, not slaughtering us, but integrating us. The older folks might whisper that it's all a trick, that any day now the Tau will reveal their true face and cart us off as slaves or worse. But with each passing day, that seems less likely. The Tau troops are professional and fairly polite. No drunken soldiers breaking down doors for sport. No arbitrators publicly executing someone for minor infractions as a lesson. The aliens mostly keep to their garrisons and patrol routes, watching but not interfering unless there's trouble. In fact, after the takeover, there's remarkably little trouble. No riots, no mass reprisals. People are wary, yes, but also intrigued and cautiously hopeful. It helps that the Tau have human collaborators ready to slide into positions of local leadership. Not necessarily traitors to humanity, some are actually our own officials who simply surrendered and swapped flags when it was clear fighting was futile. The Tau astutely keep these familiar faces around, now rebranded as advisors or counselors in the new administration. A former Imperial PDF colonel might suddenly be the liaison for planetary security under Tau command, telling his former troops to stand down and cooperate. Adept Ivy from the Administratum, who managed tithe ledgers, might be retained to help align our grain production with Tau logistic needs, under supervision, of course. Seeing these people, humans like us, working with the aliens lends a sense of continuity. It's a clever tactic. You catch more flies with honey, and nothing is sweeter than a familiar face telling you that everything is going to be all right. But as the days turn into months, the changes begin to cut deeper. Subtly at first. One morning, you wake to the sound of a heavy engine groaning and unfamiliar voices in the square. Stepping outside, you see Tau workers, the Earth caste you've learned they're called, carefully dismantling that old statue of the Emperor that stood as the town's centerpiece. A small crowd gathers. There's murmuring. That statue's been there for 100 years. It survived raids, earthquakes, a governor's attempt to melt it down for coin. And now these aliens want it gone? The Watercast official overseeing the work gives a benign explanation. The statue is being moved to a preservation site where it will be cared for as part of your cultural heritage. In its place, we will build a new public communication hub so that announcements and educational broadcasts can reach everyone more efficiently. This is for your benefit. Some people nod, accepting. Others, especially the elderly who led morning prayers at the statue's base every day, scowl in silence. Yet no one picks up a weapon or throws a stone. The Tau haven't banned the Emperor's worship outright. They said we could keep it, didn't they? But it's clear this new society might not have a central place for an 8-foot-tall idol of a human god king. The crane's chains tightened around the Emperor's bronze shoulders as the workers prepared to hoist it away. A lone voice dared to protest, an elderly woman clutching a tattered Imperial hymn book. "That statue is of the Emperor who protects," she cried out tremulously. "You can't just take him away from us." A tense silence fell. The Watercast envoy gave a carefully measured smile. "Please, honored elder, be assured, we are not removing what is sacred to you. We are preserving it and making room for new symbols that will unite all of us. Your emperor would understand the need for unity, would he not?" The old woman's eyes fell, her fury deflated into uncertainty. The crowd shuffled. No one else spoke up. Satisfied there would be no further outburst, the workers resumed their task. Within a week, the statue is gone. In its place stands a sleek obelisk of strange alloy, engraved with both Low Gothic and Tau script. It continuously scrolls gentle reminders and inspirational sayings. The first message displayed is, "The wise adapt to change, for the good of all." A few days later, it shows, "The greater good embraces all beings. Unity is hope." And one morning you catch a new line, "One people, one empire, bound by the greater good." These phrases become the backdrop of daily life, like new proverbs everyone hears until we unconsciously memorize them. They also seize control of all the Vox channels and start broadcasting regular news bulletins from the new comm hub. The old Imperial frequencies that once crackled with sporadic off-world news or ministorum sermons go silent, replaced entirely by these Tau-sanctioned updates. We're effectively cut off from the wider Imperium now. Astropathic communications have ceased. No more messages from distant cousins on other worlds, no pilgrim ships or Imperial dispatches. In this information vacuum, the Tau shape the narrative completely. And so every day or two, we gather in the square or listen from our hab units as the hub screens light up with curated stories. The bulletins are always a mix of local updates, crop yields, a new clinic opening, and Tau propaganda segments extolling how wonderful and harmonious life in the Empire is. They love showcasing the contributions of all the Empire's member species. One day, the holoscreen shows a unit of tall, bird-like Kroot mercenaries driving off an orc raid on a nearby moon, fighting side by side with Tau fire warriors. All smiles. Well, the Tau were smiling. The beaked Kroot can't exactly grin, but they looked pleased enough chewing on whatever they carved off those orcs. Another segment shows human volunteers working on a Tau-designed irrigation project on some frontier world, praising how their crops have never been better. You're not naive. You know a propaganda piece when you see one, but you also remember those volunteers are from a settlement much like yours. Perhaps their crops truly are better now. It's a subtle sell. Look what the greater good can do if you just play along. Restrictions begin to creep in too. One night, our new Tau-appointed governor, a water-caste administrator with a reassuring baritone, announces a curfew. All residents must remain in their habs after the second evening bell, for their own safety, due to some supposed guerrilla activity on a far continent. Nobody you know was planning late-night strolls anyway, but the principle is noted. We are clearly under occupation rules, even if they sound gentler than we expected. A neighbor of yours, old Maruk, the one who used to lead the daily prayers to the Emperor, stops showing up at the communal mess hall. You ask around, quietly. Rumor is he said something a bit too fiery about the aliens to the wrong ears. Now, Maruk's gone for re-education, as the whispers put it. No one knows exactly what that means, but the phrase alone sends shivers through the community. Re-education. You picture the stern lecture your father gave you as a kid when you talked back. Somehow, you suspect the Tau version is far more thorough. Sure enough, soon after, the water caste officials introduce something they call cultural integration sessions. Essentially, classes for humans to learn about Tau culture, language, and the greater good. Attendance isn't technically mandatory until it is. At first, they advertise it as an opportunity. Sign up and learn how to speak Tau. Understand our wonderful technology. It will help integrate your community and bring opportunities. Many younger folks, curious or ambitious, sign up eagerly. Who wouldn't want to learn the language of the new elite and maybe get a leg up in dealing with them? But some people resist. Why should a human farmer have to learn an alien tongue to ask for help from the government on his own planet? Sensing the reluctance, the Tau make it plain. After a month, an edict comes through that all administrative forms for requesting supplies, reporting issues, etc. must be filled out in Tau script or accompanied by a Tau translation copy. Suddenly, learning the Tau language isn't just a hobby. It's practically necessary to navigate daily bureaucracy. And of course, where can you learn it? The free evening classes taught by a very patient Tau instructor at the new community center, formerly the Imperial Chapel, incidentally, now repurposed, or as they say, rededicated, to secular communal use. But plenty of folks grumbled in private. I overheard one man at the tavern growl, "I ain't learning that Xeno-speak. My granddad died fighting blueskins. Emperor rest him. Now they want me to jabber in their language?" His friend hissed back, "Keep your voice down, you fool. They just sent my request for parts back unprocessed because I filled it out in Gothic only. They said I need a Tau translation copy. If we don't learn it, we won't even get our tools fixed or our permits approved." That's how it went, carrot and stick. They made it first an opportunity, then a necessity. Finally, sensing any reluctance left, the Tau make it plain that participation is expected of any good citizen. So you adapt. Humans are nothing if not adaptable, for better or worse. You learn to greet the day with the phrase Tauva, greater good be with you, instead of the old imperial Ave Imperator. Your kids come home speaking a mix of low Gothic and Tao words, excitedly telling you about how their teacher, a human teacher but trained by the water caste, showed them maps of the Tao Empire, spanning dozens of star systems, all peaceful and prosperous. It's a bright contrast to the only map of the galaxy you knew before, tattered charts full of war zones, warp routes, and warnings of xeno threats. Your little ones start looking at the sky not with fear of tyrannids or chaos dropping from it, but with hope of maybe visiting one of those shining Tau-sept worlds they learned about. In the evenings, you sometimes catch yourself enjoying the quiet. Under the Imperium, Aurora Tertius had its share of troubles. Bandit raids, even an attempted cult uprising once that the local Arbites put down harshly. There was always some fear gnawing at the back of your mind. Now, with the Tau drones hovering high and security patrols regular, you haven't heard of a single raid or insurrection in a long time. The world is safer in a very tangible way. You sleep easier. When you step outside at dawn, the fields practically glow under efficient agri-lights provided by the Earth caste. By many measures, you're living a better life than you were a year ago. Clean water, a full belly, healthy children, and no one screaming at you about witches or heresy or planetary duty. It's all right to admit it. The Tau do deliver on their basic promises. But, and there's always a but, you can't shake the feeling of an invisible leash. The thing about a gilded cage is that it's still a cage. Not everyone sees it, of course. Some of your neighbors genuinely think this is heaven compared to imperial rule. Take Joran, the miller's son. He's got a knack for tech and was quickly noticed by an Earth caste engineer. Now, Joran wears shiny new coveralls with a Tau emblem, helping maintain the water drones. He's learning more about machines in months than the Mechanicus ever taught any layperson. And he's proud of it, struts around with a sense of purpose. Or Sana, who used to lament that under the Imperium her life would never be more than marrying young and dying old on this rock. She's become a star pupil in those integration classes and talks of maybe joining the water caste's admin staff someday, if they'll have her. She believes she actually has a future beyond slop and fields, because the Tau told her she could. It's hard to argue with that kind of optimism, even if it's fueled by propaganda. Because what are you going to say? No, Sana, you're destined to live miserable and die pointlessly. That's the human way? You'd sound just like the old imperial preachers about duty and sacrifice. The truth is, you want to believe the Tau too, sometimes. Maybe not for yourself. You're too old and stubborn to change completely, but for your children or grandchildren. Perhaps humanity really could have a kinder destiny under the wing of these aliens than under the boot of our own kind. And then someone you know disappears, and that fantasy cracks a bit more. It's never public, never a spectacle. One day your neighbor or coworker or cousin just isn't there anymore. Maybe they had been a little too outspoken about preferring the Emperor's way, or they kept a hidden shrine in their cellar. Or perhaps they got into a scuffle with a Tau officer at the tavern after one drink too many. Nothing dramatic, not an attempted rebellion, just small acts of defiance or nonconformity. In the Imperium, the response to such behavior would have been immediate and very visible. A flogging in the square, or maybe an execution for heresy if an overzealous commissar was around. Under the Tau, the transgressor simply vanishes quietly into the night, taken aboard one of those silent grav trucks with no fanfare. Officially, if you ask, and wise folk do not ask too loudly, you'll be told they were relocated for re-education or taken to receive counseling and psychological realignment. It sounds almost like a benevolent intervention fixing a troubled mind. Unofficially, everyone knows those poor souls are taken to some secure facility and subjected to who knows what. The The term re-education camp surfaces in hushed conversations. There's talk of constant greater good propaganda being drummed into them, of strange therapies that break you down and rebuild you. A trader passing through once claimed that on another world he saw former malcontents returned after such therapy, and that they were never the same. They came back empty, he said quietly around a shared fire. Obedient, yes, quiet and polite, but empty, like whatever spark made them who they were was just gone. He mimed a drooling, vacant stare and then fell silent. We noticed more than a few listeners quickly changed the subject at that point. Some truths are too horrifying and too plausible to dwell on. In my darker moments, I imagine what might happen in those re-education facilities. Do they strap a person into a chair and flood their senses with calming lights and droning mantras of the greater good until something cracks inside? Do they slip drugs into their veins that make them suggestible, then gently talk them into denouncing everything they once believed? Perhaps they employ more high-tech means electrodes, direct-to-brain neuro-reconditioning. The results we've seen suggest it's thorough, whatever it is. The thought of coming back from such a place, a mere husk of myself, compliant but hollow, honestly frightens me more than the idea of outright torture or execution. At least death is an end. This is an erasure of who you are, while leaving your body alive to serve. The Tau don't publicly parade these punished individuals. They don't need to. The absence itself becomes the message. We all understand that those who can't accept the new order will be removed, one way or another. And unlike the Imperium, which might make a martyr out of a rebel by publicly executing them, the Tau make them non-people. They vanish, and it's as if they never existed. Soon, even speaking their name is frowned upon because, as a Watercast clerk gently put it when someone inquired too much about a missing cousin, it's best to let go of those who have chosen to absent themselves from the greater good. Dwelling on them only spreads their confusion. Chilling, isn't it? The way they frame it as if the victim chose to leave. The lesson is clear. It's easier, safer, to keep your head down, comply, and maybe count your blessings that at least you weren't the one sent off to become a hollow shell of yourself. The neighborhood learns to police itself. If someone grumbles too loudly about the Tau, others immediately shush them. Are you crazy? You want to disappear like Maruk? Keep it to yourself. Fear keeps people in line just as effectively as Imperial bolt guns did, if not more so. Now and then, a brave soul tries some token defiance. A graffiti Aquila symbol daubed on the side of the granary one morning. But the Tau's ever-watchful drones usually catch it before most even see it. That particular graffiti was scrubbed clean within an hour, and the young man who everyone suspected did it simply wasn't around the next day. No one asked where he went. Another aspect of life under Tau rule dawns on you gradually. No matter how cooperative you are, you're never really going to be one of them, or even their equal. Sure, they call humans in their empire Guevesa, literally human helpers in their tongue, which sounds friendlier than conquered subjects or useful primitives. But it essentially marks you as auxiliary to their society, not central to it. Tau are at the center, calling the shots. We humans orbit around them like minor moons around a bright planet, reflecting some light but generating none of our own. Take the job assignments. Under the Imperium, you at least in theory had the freedom, or rather the necessity, to do whatever your family trade was or whatever you could manage to survive. Under the Tau, it's all about efficient allocation of skills for the greater good. It's not overt slavery. You're usually asked what you're good at, but once they pigeonhole you, that's your role, possibly for life. Joran the miller's son got slotted into tech maintenance because he had aptitude. Great for him. But another friend of yours, Karen, who used to hunt game out in the hills, thought maybe she could serve as a scout for the Tau forces. She figured, hey, she knows the terrain best. They politely refused. Humans aren't trusted in direct military recon roles. Instead, they assigned her to a farming collective. She was not happy, to put it mildly. Karen wasn't born to plow rows. She'd spent her life stalking prey. But the Tau had spoken. They needed more food production in this region, and any able-bodied person not otherwise specialized had to pitch in. Under the greater good, you fulfill your assigned role for the good of the whole. It's basically a caste system without them explicitly saying you're at the bottom of it. Of course, the Tau themselves are rigidly casted by birth. Fire caste are soldiers, earth caste laborers and engineers, water caste diplomats and bureaucrats, air caste pilots and starfarers, and the ethereals above all. Humans don't fit into that scheme, so we get slotted in where useful, often in roles the Tau either don't have enough bodies for or don't want to expend their own on. You're never going to be a general giving orders to fire warriors. At best, a human might lead other human auxiliaries in battle, and even then a Tau commander will outrank and oversee. You won't be an ethereal, obviously, or even a planetary governor with real autonomy. The water caste handles governance, and maybe you can assist one as a translator or a regional manager if you're particularly skilled and very loyal. Essentially, the ceiling for a human in this society is firmly set at trusted assistant, and that's if you're exemplary. There are rare stories of humans rising higher. A former Imperial Guard officer who defected with her whole company is now said to command contingents of human auxiliaries, Orbi, across the Empire, lauded in Tau media as proof of what we can achieve under the greater good. They gave her a fine rank and a new purpose. But even she ultimately answers to an ethereal's orders, like any Tau commander would. Even the best of us can only ever be the best human in the room, never the one truly at the top. Most of us remain ordinary citizens, well cared for, perhaps, but with no say in the grand schemes. The Tau will tell you this isn't about inferiority, just about practicality. They'll openly praise human contributions. Your people's resilience and adaptability are great assets to the Empire, a water caste bureaucrat told us at a ceremony honoring farmers who exceeded the harvest quota thanks to Tau hydrotech. They'll even grant a few token humans minor positions on advisory councils, or allows a local community to elect a human mayor who answers to a Tau superintendent anyway. But real power, real decisions, those stay firmly in Tau hands. You can sense it in how even the friendliest Tau talk to us. There's always that slight condescension, like a teacher to students or a parent to children. It's not dripping contempt, it's more subtle than that. A benign pat on the head, figuratively speaking, to reassure us we're valued, but also to remind us we're dependent. Sometimes you wonder, how is this truly different from the Imperium's attitude? The Emperor, distant, godlike, never gave us a choice either. You were born a subject of his will and expected to serve the species without question. The Tau ethereals, those almost mythical leaders of theirs, are similarly unquestionable. They just couch their directives in softer words and smiling rationales. The result is the same. You do as you're told because the alternative is unthinkable, whether that's damnation in the eyes of the ecclesiarchy or being labeled against the greater good by the Tau. You really start to feel the trade-offs of this better life in the little things day to day. The marketplace, for instance. Under the Imperium, you bartered and hustled to get what you needed because official channels were slow, stingy, or corrupt. There was a kind of freedom in that wild hustle, risky as it was. Now, the Tau have reorganized the local economy with efficient rationing and requisition systems. Everyone gets their allotted supplies, and extra needs can be requested via proper forms. It's all very civilized and regimented on paper. But Emperor forbid, old habits die hard. You still invoke him in exasperation. You want something that isn't approved. Say, a bottle of strong Amasec liquor, or a pack of low sticks to take the edge off. The old black markets have been stamped out as antisocial hoarding. A vice that once provided a tiny release from the daily grind is now a mark of deviance from the greater good's health and productivity guidelines. They even replaced our currency. Imperial thrones and gelt coins became worthless paperweights overnight, supplanted by new credit chits emblazoned with Tau symbols. Most folks were too busy adjusting to everything else to put up much fuss about the money. We traded one authority's scrip for another's and carried on. But I kept one battered throne coin in my pocket for a while, as if to remind myself that the world hadn't always been this way, that once the Emperor's face on a coin meant something. Eventually, even I forgot about it, and it ended up in a drawer somewhere, a little relic of a bygone era no one uses anymore. Then there's the matter of faith, which lingers like a ghost. Initially, the Tau didn't forcefully stop Emperor worship. True. A small Emperor shrine still exists in town, maintained by a few stubborn holdouts, but attendance has dwindled. Some fear being seen there. Others have genuinely been swayed to the new philosophies, and the Tau encourage that erosion of faith at every turn. There are no outright bans yet, no one dragging you out of the chapel by your hair, but subtle nudges. Perhaps you hear that those who attend the greater good meditation sessions get priority when new housing is assigned. Or the clinic's nurse mentions that the Tau medical advisors have especially good rapport with citizens who embrace modern, meaning Tau, beliefs. Meanwhile, the old chapel gets no materials to repair its roof, and eventually a notice goes up that the building has structural issues and must be closed for safety. The Tau promised to build a new, inclusive community center in its place, one where all beliefs are welcome, they say. That never quite materializes, and if it does, it's just a hall where a big Tau symbol hangs, and pamphlets on the greater good fill the literature racks. Bit by bit, the old rites and symbols fade from public view. You catch your own children one night before bed, reciting not the Emperor's prayer like you taught them, but a Tau litany they learned at school. We serve the greater good, and the greater good cares for us all. It's almost sweet the way they mumble it earnestly. When you ask where they learned that, they innocently say their teacher taught them a new bedtime reflection to replace those scary imperial prayers about death and duty. You want to be angry, but what comes out is just a tired sigh. Perhaps it is for the best. They'll have easier lives believing in the Tau's gentle utopia than clinging to a faith that would make them outsiders now. Still, something in your gut twists. It feels like betraying your ancestors, everything your people once held sacred. But here we are. You didn't fight when the Tau came, and now your family's imperial heritage is slipping away in a single generation. This is how the Tau win hearts and minds, not by making you denounce the Emperor on day 1, but by making the Emperor irrelevant by year 5. By the time they do outright forbid the Imperial Creed, if they even need to bother, most people won't care enough to resist. Many won't even notice. Sometimes the Empire literally reshapes our community to serve its plans. One day, for instance, an order comes down that a significant portion of our town is to volunteer for resettlement to a newly established colony on another world. According to the announcement, families who sign up will receive better housing and stipends, helping to establish a model mixed settlement of humans and Tau on the frontier. They frame it as a grand opportunity. In reality, it feels like being uprooted and shuffled around like game pieces. Some of us suspect our town was chosen because whispers of dissent were a bit louder here than elsewhere. What better way to break up potential trouble than to scatter its people? The pressure to join the resettlement is intense, not overtly with threats, but with persistent encouragement and a few implied hints that those who stay behind might not receive certain future benefits. In the end, dozens of neighbors pack up and leave on Tau shuttles, uncertain if they'll ever see their home again. The Empire gets what it wants. A potentially troublesome population diluted and relocated, and they spin it as a success story of human-Tau cooperation to build a bright new colony. It's hard to miss the tactic, though, divide and rule, with a smiling facade. Our town feels emptier after that, missing familiar faces that are now light years away. And on the official record, it was completely voluntary and for the greater good of all. It's a reminder that even our homes are ultimately at the disposal of the Empire's grand designs. Even amid our relative prosperity, if you look closely, you can spot the quieter forms of control. For instance, there's been a peculiar decline in birth rates since the Tau took charge. Fewer children giggling in the lanes, fewer cries in the maternity ward. The official explanation from the Earth-caste medics is that with better education and opportunities, people are choosing to have smaller families. Maybe that's partly true, but some suspect a more deliberate hand at work. Those mandatory health screenings and vaccinations everyone took without question. Who knows what was really in them? I recall a local midwife confiding that fertility issues have mysteriously spiked, and she's delivered far fewer babies this year than any year she can remember. The Tau, of course, dismiss any such talk as baseless. They point to statistical models and say it's natural for population growth to level off in a developed society. Still, the cynical part of me wonders, isn't a smaller human population easier for them to manage? Less chance of unrest, less strain on resources. If the Tau are limiting our numbers, they'd surely frame it as benevolence, preventing overcrowding or famine down the line. In a way, it's a horrifyingly gentle form of control. No battles or blood, just families quietly shrinking over time, until one day we're a well-tended minority in our own homeland. It's only a whisper of a suspicion, nothing you could ever prove. But in a life where so much else is decided for us, it wouldn't be the strangest thing to lose control over. Day to day, we live in what I'd call a gilded dusk. Not quite dark, not truly light. There's prosperity, order, and even a kind of gentle hope if you don't scratch too deep. Families laugh together at communal celebrations. The Emperor's birthday feast day was quietly struck from the calendar and replaced by a new holiday commemorating the Tau's arrival. And yes, people still attend and enjoy the free food and music. I remember that first anniversary festival. The capital city hosted a grand parade. Humans and Tau marched side by side. Children waved flags that combined the Tau symbol with our planet's old crest, as if to say our identities were now intertwined. One of the revered ethereals even visited to give a keynote speech. Seeing him in person, robed in white, hovering on an anti-grav platform above the crowd, was something every person there will remember. When he spoke, in flawless Gothic tinged with a pleasant accent, his words were humble and inspiring at once. He praised our resilience, thanked us for our trust, and assured us that together we would build a paradise free of war and fear. I couldn't help it. I felt moved. Imagine an alien demagogue making this farmer's heart swell with cautious pride. Whether it was some unnatural charisma or just the relief of hearing anyone promise peace in our lifetimes, I won't guess. But I clapped and cheered along with everyone else that day. After the speeches, the festival was downright joyful. The Tau set up stalls handing out sweet pastries, real sugar, none of the sawdust-tasting ration bars we grew up on, and demonstrated little toy drones for the kids. Music. A fusion of human folk tunes and Tau melodies played over loudspeakers. People danced who hadn't danced in years. It struck me that with enough pageantry and a few kind gestures, the Tau had managed in 1 year to get a beleaguered population to celebrate being conquered. It was a masterclass in gentle subjugation. Make it feel like a holiday. In the months and years after, the physical face of our towns continued to change too. The Tau love order and efficiency, and they started refurbishing everything. They paved the main roads so smoothly you could roll a pebble for a mile. They put up street lamps that glow softly blue at night, humming with some inexhaustible power source. New structures rose up, a medical clinic with clean lines and bright white walls, a domed meeting hall where our old Gothic town hall once stood. The old one was declared seismically unsound and taken down, of course. Bit by bit, the austere stone and plasteel aesthetic of Imperial architecture gave way to the sleek polymer curves of Tau design. Some people admired it. Progress, they said. Others felt a pang seeing our heritage erased. I recall a craftsman who had carved the Emperor's aquila above the arch of the old town hall. He salvaged the wooden emblem when they demolished the building, and now it hangs in his barn, collecting dust. He joked to me once, "At least the pigeons will still recognize the old bird." It's not that the new buildings are ugly or anything. In fact, they're quite practical and pleasant inside. But they don't feel ours. Walk down the street and you might think you are on a Tau colony world, until you catch a glimpse of an old statue tucked in a courtyard, or a faded parchment of Imperial scripture someone pasted on their door. Little reminders of what was, now overshadowed by what is. It's not just the buildings and rules that changed, even the very people around us did. As the Empire integrated our world, we began seeing many more non-humans in our daily life. Tau colonists arrived to help administer and develop the economy, so having blue-skinned neighbors or co-workers soon became normal. And not just Tau. Other member species of the Empire passed through too. I recall the first time a squad of Kroot mercenaries came to our town. Those tall, spiky, bird-like aliens caused quite a stir. Under the Imperium, if you saw a Kroot, it meant a horrifying raid was imminent. Now, these ones were walking calmly through our market, on their way back from fighting some battle on our behalf. One of them peeled off to haggle with our butcher, casually buying a sack full of raw meat for a post-mission snack. We all kept a respectful distance. The butcher was happy to make a big sale, but he admitted later he feared he might be on the menu if he made the wrong move. Then there were the Vespid insectoid beings with multifaceted eyes and vibrating wings. A contingent of them visited as part of a diplomatic envoy. They communicated in clicks and buzzes, translated by a handheld device, and were surprisingly courteous. Still, it was eerie seeing children who once played Swat the Bug, now staring wide-eyed at a 10-foot-tall wasp person, offering them candied fruit. Over time, we adjusted to these sights. A Kroot warrior browsing our produce market, a group of Earthcast and human engineers fixing a generator together, a Watercast ambassador hosting a mixer attended by human farmers and Vespid delegates. Scenes that would have been utterly unthinkable when I was young. It's a smaller galaxy now on this side of the fence. Sometimes I wonder if this is what the Emperor originally wanted, unity with other species. Before the horrors of the galaxy made it impossible. It's a fanciful thought, likely heretical by old standards, but it crosses my mind when I see my kids waving hello to a Tau drone operator or a demiurge trader, as if it's perfectly natural. Interestingly, as time goes on, some of us have formed genuine rapport with individual Tau. It's hard to admit openly, but I've met aliens I consider friends. The Earthcast technician who helped upgrade our irrigation system, for instance. A soft-spoken fellow named Corva spent weeks working alongside my family. We'd share lunch breaks, and he'd ask about our human customs while teaching us Tao words for the tools we used. One evening, after fixing a particularly tricky pump valve together, we sat on the porch and watched the sun set, talking about nothing in particular. He showed me a tiny hologram of his mate and newborn child back on Tau, and I showed him a locket with my parents' portraits. In that moment, there was no conqueror and conquered, just two fathers and husbands swapping stories. I caught myself thinking, Emperor above, if only it were always like this. People to people, without empires and dogmas. Then the moment passed, and we remembered who we were. He had reports to file. I had an early field shift. Still, the camaraderie lingered. If the greater good means anything on a personal level, it might be that the ability to sit with someone who isn't human and see them as just another soul trying to make it in the galaxy. Of course, these small friendships don't change the larger picture. My Earth-caste friend isn't about to join me in denouncing the ethereals, and I'm not about to suddenly forget that I never had a choice in any of this. But it does complicate the feelings. It was easier when every Tau was just the enemy alien. Now some have names and faces I care about. Perhaps that's part of their plan too. Integration not only through rules, but through genuine interpersonal bonds. It's harder to rebel when the person you'd be rebelling against ate at your dinner table last week and helped repair your roof. Harder to hate the hand that feeds you when you've shaken that hand and found it surprisingly steady and warm. All of this raises the question, what happens when danger rears its head? The galaxy is still full of threats, after all. Surely, even under Tau rule, Aurora Tertius isn't immune to the horrors out there. And you'd be right. When the first real external threat appeared post-conquest, a pirate raid, or maybe chaos warbands slipping in, we never got a clear answer. The difference in how our protectors responded was stark. Under the Imperium, if a band of heretics had landed, the PDF would scramble desperately, likely fail to protect the outlying farms, and eventually some Imperial Navy ships would show up months later to bomb everything, with us possibly included, to dust as a solution. Under the Tau, they reacted swiftly and precisely. Their patrol drones picked up the incoming enemy craft, fire-cast teams deployed in coordinated fashion, and they ambushed the raiders in the Badlands before those scum even got close to our habitation zones. A few distant thumps in the night, maybe a brief exchange of tracer fire on the horizon, and by morning it was as if nothing had happened. Except it had. The Tau had saved our lives and property efficiently and without fuss. The next day, the administrator commended the forces, and the propaganda machine kicked in. A bulletin praising the heroic defense, emphasizing how Tau and human auxiliary scouts worked together to keep everyone safe. It wasn't entirely propaganda. It was largely true. You do feel safer, legitimately. More and more folks conclude, we're better off under the Tau. The Emperor's servants never responded that fast or cared that much about our little farms. It's hard to argue with that kind of result. The social contract, you trade some loyalty and freedom for security and prosperity, appears to be holding up. Then the other shoe drops, because security cuts both ways. One season, the Tau decide to launch an expansion campaign using our world as a staging ground. Suddenly, those of us enjoying peace are expected to contribute to their war. Not a distant imperial tithe where grain or soldiers vanish to fight on far-off battlefields, but here and now for the Tau's own military goals. They start recruiting, shall we say, conscripting human auxiliaries. At first, it's presented as an honor. Brave citizens step forward and take up arms for the greater good. Defend your home alongside your Tau allies. They form a Guavesa unit, basically a militia of human volunteers, some eager, many voluntold by circumstance. You might find a pulse rifle thrust into your hands if you're of age and fit. They train you up a bit, and admittedly it's better training and gear than the Imperial Guard ever gave its conscripts. Some of the younger men and women even join with enthusiasm. The Imperium never let common folk wield such advanced weaponry, never called guardsmen anything but expendable. By contrast, the Tau officers address our recruits almost like partners, albeit junior partners. A friend of mine, a former guardsman, had a son of fighting age. When the call for volunteers came, the father quietly urged his boy to hide out on a cousin's farm in the hinterlands, just until the recruit drive passed. The mother, though, was terrified of what would happen if the Tau discovered them evading duty. In the end, the young man stepped forward and registered at the recruitment office rather than risk bringing trouble on his family. I watched the father when his son marched off with the other new auxiliaries. He stood rigid, eyes full of equal parts pride and fear. He had fought for the Emperor decades ago, and now his only child was marching off to fight for the Tau. In a galaxy full of cruel ironies, that one cut deep. One boy from our town, the miller's eldest, managed to send a letter back after a couple months in training. He wrote that the drills were tough but fair, and surprisingly encouraging. Instead of the Imperial way of breaking you down with screaming and punishment, the Tau instructors would calmly explain tactics and praise the unit when they improved. They were given well-cooked meals, regular rest, and even holovid lessons on why they fight. A crash course in greater good philosophy mixed in with target practice. He sounded almost happy, saying it was the first time he felt like a professional soldier and not cannon fodder. He marveled at the pulse rifle he was issued, how accurate and deadly it was compared to the rusty autogun his PDF squad had back in the day. In closing, he said he believed he was fighting for something truly worth fighting for now, a future where no one has to live in fear like we did. That line stuck with me. Emperor knows what kind of brainwashing they'd done, or maybe it was genuine conviction blooming, but he was changed. Shortly after, his unit shipped out off-world, supposedly to counter an Orc incursion in the next sector. I never heard from him again. The Tau don't publicize human auxiliary losses much. If his company was wiped out, we likely wouldn't be told explicitly, just quietly given a memorial ceremony and some posthumous medal, maybe. His parents got a notice of commendation months later, with no direct mention of him being dead, only that he served the greater good with honor. We all knew what that meant. It was a bitter pill to swallow. He had died far from home, fighting someone else's war for a cause he barely knew a year prior. And yet, part of me hoped his end was quick, and that in his final moments he truly believed in that cause. It might be the only solace one can find in such a situation. If a task is especially dangerous, or a target needs softening up, guess who might be sent in first or posted to hold the riskiest flank? The humans, who are more expendable than a precious Tau fire warrior. They don't say that, of course, but you notice it. During an engagement against some particularly stubborn human rebels from a neighboring system, ironic that we now call fellow humans rebels, our Guevesa units were sent to flush out sniper nests in the ruins of an old city while the Tau fire warriors provided covering fire. It made sense tactically. Who better to navigate human-built ruins than humans? But it was also bloody work, perilous in the extreme. Losses were high among the auxiliaries that day, including a lad from our town, barely 18, who had signed up thinking he was defending us from terrorists. In a way, he was. But to the Imperium, those terrorists were loyalists, and we had become the traitors. And that's the rub. If the Imperium ever comes back, or if you ever find yourself facing Imperial forces, You can bet they won't see you as an innocent bystander. In the eyes of the Imperium, by accepting Xeno rule and worse, taking up arms for them, you are a collaborator and a heretic of the worst stripe. They have a special hatred for Gue Vesa, those humans who fight alongside the Tau. Should you be captured by the Astra Militarum, or, throne forbid, the Inquisition, you'll be extremely lucky to get a swift death. More likely, they'd subject you to tortures to cleanse your supposed alien taint or interrogate you as if some Tau mind control must be making you act against your emperor. There is no going home to the Imperium after this, no redemption in their eyes. I sometimes wake from nightmares where Imperial warships appear in our skies to exact vengeance. In one such dream, I'm dragged before a grim inquisitor, and he demands to know why I bowed to Xenos. I have no answer that satisfies him, so he condemns me as a heretic on the spot. In another, I see our whole city burning under orbital bombardment, with a Vox-amplified voice declaring, "Thus is the price of treachery." Those nights I wake up sweating and have to remind myself that it hasn't happened. Not yet, anyway. We're truly severed from the Emperor's light now, cast out, for better or worse. This knowledge haunts some of the older veterans in our community. When the Tau call for militia to repel an Imperial attack, it hasn't happened here yet, but we hear of it happening on other contested worlds. Not everyone is so eager to point a gun at their former countrymen. A few even try to hide or desert instead of fight against the Imperial forces. But the Tau anticipated that. Those who shirk defense duties quickly find themselves in custody, labeled as cowards or suspected Imperial sympathizers. A couple of would-be draft dodgers disappeared one night before a big operation. We all knew what that meant. The rest of us got the message loud and clear. You fight for the Tau or you vanish. So when the day comes, you pull the trigger on fellow humans advancing under an Aquila banner. Because if you don't, the blue-armored fellow beside you might just as soon turn his rifle on you. It's a sickening position to be in, caught between alien overlords you've grown to depend on and human liberators who would execute you for treason. It's a cruel paradox. Under Tau rule, we might be safer and better fed, but we can be forced to kill or be killed in service of an empire that isn't even ours. And if the Imperium ever liberated us, they'd likely purge our population for heresy anyway. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. As if alien occupation and moral quandaries weren't enough, there are other nightmares we hardly considered until we were living under the Tau's wing. The Tau, for all their technology and reason, have blind spots, especially where the warp and its demons are concerned. They have almost no psychers among themselves. They barely register in the warp. To them, much of what the Imperium constantly fears, demonic incursions, chaos cults, possession, seems like primitive superstition or at least wildly exaggerated threats. That doesn't mean those threats aren't real for us. On Aurora Tertius, under Imperial rule, we at least had the Ecclesiarchy keeping an eye out for cults and a sanctioned psyker or two to sniff out witchery. The Tau did away with all that as remnants of human superstition. For a while, nothing seemed different. Maybe chaos truly was far away from this quiet agri-world, but absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, as they say. A year or so into Tau governance, a strange malaise struck a remote village in the hills. People suffered nightmares, then a few gruesome murders happened, neighbors tearing each other apart in a frenzy. The Tau were baffled. Their medics found no pathogens. Their security drones reported nothing. Those of us who remember tales of chaos had a sinking feeling. Eventually, a small team of human volunteers, including one former preacher who had gone into hiding, uncovered the cause. A minor chaos cult had taken root, led by a deranged hermit who interpreted the coming of the Tau as the fall of the false emperor, and sought power from dark gods. He'd been performing foul rituals in secret, and something had answered. We were lucky. It was small-scale enough that a few last shots and a swift execution ended the immediate danger. When we presented the evidence to the Tau authorities, they handled the aftermath pragmatically, quarantined the area, thanked us for our service, and began an educational campaign to dispel harmful superstitions, as if ignorance was the cure. They just couldn't fully wrap their heads around it. To them, it was an isolated psychological aberration, not the spiritual threat we knew it to be. I remember a water caste official visiting our town not long after that incident, reassuring us that everything was fine. She said with the utmost confidence, "Your fears are understandable, given your people's history, but rest assured there are no such things as demons preying on you. Those are myths used by your previous rulers to keep you in fear. You are safe under our protection." She meant well, I think. But many of us knew she was dead wrong. There are demons. There are worse things than Xenos out there. But under Tau rule, we're discouraged from even acknowledging them. Speak too fervently about the Emperor's light warding off evil, and you'll be marked as a problematic cultist yourself. So we keep our old warding rituals quietly. A few of the older folks still mutter the litany of protection before bed, just in case, while their grandchildren roll their eyes and recite the Tau's calming mantras instead. In this, perhaps, lies the greatest peril. The Tau, in making us feel safe, might leave us truly vulnerable to threats they don't even believe in. The Imperium's paranoia and brutality were partly born of necessity. They knew what hungers in the void. The Tau's optimism could be a fatal weakness that we, ordinary humans in their care, will pay for if the stars turn against us. At the end of it all, the life of a human under the Tau Empire is one of trade-offs and ironic truths. On the surface, it might even look idyllic next to many Imperial worlds. We have fewer daily worries, more creature comforts. The boot isn't on our neck, at least not obviously. It's hovering just above, ready to press down if needed. People are healthier, better fed, not worked to death in manufactoria or lost in needless wars by uncaring commanders. To a hive drudge in the Imperium or a serf on some feudal planet, our life would indeed seem a paradise. But paradise in Warhammer 40,000 always has a price. Here, the price is your agency, your cultural identity, and the truth itself. We live with a smile on our faces and a tracker on our ankle. Metaphorically, sometimes literally. In the Imperium, though you had nothing, you at least knew what you were. A human being, a tiny part of a grand, if awful, human empire, fighting and suffering for the supposed survival of our species. Under the Tau, you become something else. A pet project in a xeno-social experiment, a useful tool in an alien agenda. You survive, even thrive, but as a cog in a machine that isn't built for you at its core. There's a precariousness to it all, too. The Tau Empire is young and not the dominant power in the galaxy. If some greater threat sweeps through, a tyrannid fleet, a major chaos incursion, or the Imperium deciding to make an example of our planet, our oh-so-enlightened overlords might not be able to save us. They might even cut their losses and retreat if their strategists deem it necessary. Where would that leave us? Caught in the crossfire or at the mercy of whatever comes next. If the Imperium reclaimed this world, they'd likely view us all as tainted collaborators. Best case scenario, we'd be shipped off to penal colonies or mind-wiped and re-educated in the Imperial Creed, and that's the best case. Worst case, well, exterminatus has never been off the table where the Inquisition is concerned, and the Xenos-loving citizens of a seceded world rank high on the purge list. For now, though, those are remote hypotheticals. Day to day, we live in a gilded dusk with our myriad compromises. We do have safety, stability, even simple pleasures now that we never had under Imperial rule. Families laugh at those new holidays. Crime is low, indeed hard to be a criminal when the omnipresent surveillance drones see almost everything, and when any whiff of dissent is quietly removed before it can become crime. And with everyone's basic needs provided for, desperation, the mother of theft and violence, dwindles. I can walk across town at midnight without fearing bandits or gangs, a miracle by preoccupation standards, but I also know an automated drone is humming above, tracking my heat signature, ready to call in a patrol if I stray somewhere I shouldn't. It's a trade-off, like everything else under the greater good. In the final tally, life under the greater good is still life under someone's thumb. A kinder, softer thumb, padded with noble rhetoric, but a thumb nonetheless. The Tau will tell you it's all for your benefit, that they lifted us up from our brutish past. And in fairness, they did lift many of us from squalor and despair. But what they don't mention is the weight that replaces that despair, the quiet, ever-present weight of conformity. The price of this new life is your old life, your old loyalties, your old beliefs, and any notion that you control your own destiny. In the end, a human under Tau rule is living in a gilded cage. A spacious, comfortable cage with colorful walls painted with ideals of unity and peace. But the locks are just as secure. Your life is not your own. It's part of the great project now, the grand experiment of the greater good. You don't get to opt out. This is the trade we've made, survival and comfort in exchange for freedom and pride. Is it worth it? Ask 5 people here and you'll get 5 different answers, usually hushed and hedged. Some would say absolutely better a gilded cage than a rotting, crumbling prison under the Imperium. Others quietly lament what we lost, even as they enjoy what we gained. As for me, I still haven't decided what I'd choose if I actually had a choice. Live on one's knees or die on one's feet. The old saying goes. The truth is, most of us here have chosen to live, even if it meant kneeling. Heroism and martyrdom we leave to those still under the Imperium's spell. We common folk have a future to eke out. One day, the next generation might not even understand the conflict that tore us up inside. My own children are growing up under the greater good, reciting its tenets as naturally as I once recited the catechisms of the Emperor. They'll never know the fear of a sector governor's wrath, or the sting of an ecclesiarch's lash for missing a prayer. They also won't know what it means to shout, "For the Emperor," with genuine devotion. Maybe that's for the best, a simpler, safer life, even if it lacks a certain grand purpose. I sometimes watch them play and laugh, carefree under the drone's gentle gaze, and I think, perhaps this is the real reason we tolerate the Tau. Not for us, but for them, so that they might grow up without the constant terror and indoctrination that we endured. They'll have their own indoctrination to be sure, but at least it doesn't burn or bleed them. If that's the most we can hope for in this cruel galaxy, children smiling instead of screaming, then perhaps the greater good is greater, at least in that single precious regard. So if you ever hear someone say, maybe life is better under the Tau, know that in some ways they're right. But better is not the same as good, or free, or fair. It simply means you'll live a bit longer and a bit more comfortably, so long as you smile and say, yes, of course, for the greater good, like you truly mean it. And if you can't, well, you won't be around long enough for anyone to hear your contrary opinion. In the grim darkness of the far future, even the kindest conquerors are still conquerors. The Tau's greater good may wear a friendly face, but it still demands your soul. Life under their rule means your life is never truly your own. That is how it looks for the Imperial everyman absorbed into the Tau Empire, a future that glitters with promise, while hiding shadows just as dark as any that came before in this cruel, indifferent galaxy. In the end, all we can do is endure. And perhaps endurance, the simple act of living on despite it all, is the closest thing to victory that an ordinary human can hope for in the 41st millennium.